Hey there, it's Valerie Ling, clinical psychologist, director, founder of the Center for Effective Living, coming to you at a later than usual time and also not quite set up the way that I usually set up because I'm actually just about to head inside and finish up on dinner. It's been an unusually long day for me today, so I'm a little bit off schedule, but it's my commitment to, at least for this month of February, to come on live and talk to you every weekday. So the topic for today is under the category of dynamics. So something to do with knowing yourself, personal dynamic, or something to do with a relational dynamic. And today I'd like to talk to you about conflict. So it's a topic that came up for me last week when I was talking to someone, and the topic came up about being conflict avoidant. Why is it so difficult for some of us, most of us, to engage with conflict? And as we got chatting, I started to talk about, well, it really depends on your relationship with conflict. Depends on where you've come from with conflict. Some people are quite comfortable with it. And I think your relationship with conflict has a lot to do with where you've had that conflict growing up and your past experiences with it. So the first thing I'd like to say is that not all conflict is the same. There's conflict at the war level, where you're actually at physical threat, although maybe not so much for us. But there's the kind of conflict that is at a psychological level, threatens our sense of existence and well-being. So psychologically, it's a costly thing to engage with conflict, and that's often the sort of conflict that it comes from relationships that perhaps have been toxic, have been abusive, relationships where it's not just a matter of a disagreement, but it's really inherent relational conflict, and that probably falls into the category of perpetual and unsolvable conflict. And so if you stay in a situation where you don't get any resolution, particularly if it's becoming to the point where you're being abused, or where the conflict in the relationship is at the point where it's not moving, and you've tried, and both parties have tried to resolve it, and it's not moving, yeah, that's probably a very significant, costly type of conflict. But I'd like to talk about solvable conflict, conflict that isn't at that level. Now, often our relationship with conflict, especially if we've had perpetual, really toxic level conflict, will then start to color and impact the way that we see all other conflict. Solvable conflict is the type of thing that comes up maybe because you're negotiating a task. You might have different ways of doing things. Or perhaps something has come up in the way that you're interacting with someone whom usually you don't have any problems with, but you've recognized that, oh, I don't know if I agree with that or whether I feel comfortable with that. And you're actually feeling some kind of conflict. It could be a disagreement as well with someone over a topic. It could be conflict over a task, not being able to actually move in what you want to do because of a particular obstacle, or a particular process that requires you to interact with people. So the second thing I want to say is determine what's your solvable conflict. Don't assume that all conflict is going to have the same consequences as the kind of conflict that I talked about earlier. See if you can articulate what the problem actually is. This is where you actually need to take some time to actually articulate the problem, right? So once you've articulated what the problem is, then you figure out which parts of it are solvable. Right? Do you need to ask for more resources? Do you need to clarify something? Do you need someone to clarify it with you? And then you also need to figure out whether, is it something where there's a relational conflict? Is it a case where you actually need to articulate what someone did or what someone said, how it made you feel? Or perhaps you have a particular need. You're not getting enough of something in a relationship and you need to express that. So once you can articulate what the problem is, and you pretty much can see that, yeah, it's pretty much solvable, either by having an assertive communication with someone, or even just putting some things into place in the processes or the procedures such that the conflict resolves, and then you can communicate with the people who are on the project with you. So not all conflict is bad. In fact, conflict can be very good for us. It certainly is the impetus for growth and for change. And if we can actually not be afraid and overwhelmed by the emotional side of things that come up when we have conflict, and actually start to determine, is it a perpetual thing or is it a solvable thing? And if it is a solvable thing, well, what do I actually really need to solve it? Who do I need to speak to? What are the next steps I need to do? You don't always have to figure it out in the moment. You can actually say, you know what, I think I need to think about that. How about I get back to you? All right. Have a wonderful evening. Talk to you soon.